You talk about, all the misinformation. It's funny, too, because this is the other thing I take away from Jen Psaki's comment. They're the ones identifying misinformation. Well, how many times have they been wrong on that? Over the last 4 years, they told us the protesters were peaceful last summer. They told us that Republicans defunded the police. They told us the dossier was real. They told us Trump colluded with Russia. Bob Mueller did a $30 million investigation, said that's not accurate.
I'm Dave Rubin, and joining me today is a congressman for Ohio's 4th District. He serves as the ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee and is a co-founder of the House Freedom Caucus. Congressman Jim Jordan, welcome to the Rubin Report.
It is good to be with you, Dave, and thank you for what you do. Thank you for fighting for freedom and First Amendment liberties for everyone. The country appreciates that, so good to be with you.
Oh, well, I appreciate the kind words. I can bounce that right back at you. You were one of the leaders, especially, I think, on the big tech stuff, fighting for free speech and free expression and keeping the government and big tech out of every little facet of our lives. So actually, let's start right there.
Sure.
Big tech. Well, I'll give you the broad question first, and then we'll get into the specifics.
Yeah.
Big tech, what do we do? Do you want to regulate? Do you want to break them up? Do you believe competition is enough? Is it all of those? Is it none of those?
No, it's all of those and probably some more. I do think you got to get rid of the liability protection, the so-called Section 230. You got that's a start. Then I think you have to give, and we have a series of they'll be in bill form soon, but ideas we're talking about: get rid of 230, private right of action, like big tech make some moderate content moderation decision about you. They got to tell you why. There needs to be some trend. Why'd they do that? And frankly, if they do it, and like DeSantis did in Florida, if you're a candidate for office and they do those kind of things, there should be a right of action you have to hold them accountable. So that's something we're looking at. And then, frankly, I think, Justice Thomas has, I think, more than hinted that he wants to address this issue and talking about big tech and the power they have. So what we're also looking at doing is speeding up the antitrust actions in our court system so it gets to the Supreme Court and we can get an answer. After all, the Trump administration, both the FTC brought antitrust action against Facebook and the Justice Department has brought an antitrust action against Google. And we'll see how that all shakes out with the Biden DOJ. But I think that's where it has to focus versus what the Democrats are talking about doing, which is just giving more power to the FTC, which I think would translate into big government colluding with big tech to further stick it to conservatives.
Right, which is pretty much what's happening already. On the 230 point, my audience they all know about the difference between platform and publisher and all that. The pushback on getting rid of 230, which I'm basically for getting rid of it, so I think we're pretty much lined up there. The pushback, though, is that if you get rid of the protections, that basically all of these platforms, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, et cetera, that they will have to censor more because they'll be worried about the liability. What would you say to that?
Legitimate concern. There's also the concern that they're so big they can handle the lawsuits that come when they do censor people, and versus the competition that we want to have happen. But I just think the fundamental issue is, look, if they're making publishing decisions, editorial decisions, they're not supposed to have the liability protection, and we know that's what they're doing. So I think you just have to look at the fundamental question and say, okay, you're making those editorial decisions, you don't get the protection, and then go from there. But that's why I think you also need the other things I talked about to actually address this. Again, what concerns me most is, in an effort to deal with censorship, we have people embracing this idea that, we got to give the government, the bureaucracy, the agencies more regulatory power. And I just think that's a mess. And frankly, we just saw this. We just saw this with Jen Psaki, the spokesperson for the president of the United States. Think about what she said. She said big tech are now where so many people get their news, i.e., they're the press. And so she said, we are working with the press to stop certain information from getting to we the people, the American people. That is a direct violation of their First Amendment freedom of the press liberties we have. That's scary. And they got some list of 12 people who they said are putting out misinformation. So there's that sort of fundamental question. I think that's what the concern is that marriage of big government and big tech, I think only means conservatives get it worse.
When you hear Psaki say something like that, the word that to me was where the real bell went off was she said, we flag content for Facebook. The implication is we're doing it together, right? We're flagging it for them. When you hear that, do you ever go to your Democratic counterparts and go, guys, look, we may not agree on tax rates, we may not agree on abortion or blah, 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 but I thought we at least agreed on First Amendment stuff. Do they take that meeting? Do they take that call?
They used to. I don't know if they would now. And frankly, I'm skeptical they would now, because it has gotten so partisan. And we've had a number of Democrats, some of them on the Judiciary Committee, the committee that's supposed to safeguard the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, and Americans' fundamental rights and liberties. We've had so many of them cheer on big tech when they censor conservatives. So it's not the same. It used to be that you could work with. I mean, I always make tell this story. Dennis Kucinich, former member, is a friend of mine. I mean, I talked to him on the phone a few months. I just texted him yesterday because I saw him on a clip on Tucker. Dennis is an old school liberal who says, let's make the best argument. Let's have the debate. And he was with us on civil liberties. But that's not where today's left is. Today's left is authoritarian. And you're seeing it from the spokesperson of the president of the United States in the White House briefing room. So it's a different animal today. And again, I think that's why you're so concerned and I'm so concerned and so many Americans are about what's really happening to our freedoms.
Yeah, Dennis Kucinich is actually a perfect example. When he ran for president, which was, probably 16 years ago, something like that. He was the furthest left Democrat at that point. And basically the only people who will talk to him now are Tucker and Fox News. They would never put him on CNN at this point.
And he was a champion of civil. We were on the oversight committee together when Democrats had power back when Dennis was in Congress. He chaired this subcommittee. I was the ranking member. And when it flipped, I was chairman. He was ranking member. And there were issues where we could work together. Typically, they were civil. Like we were both concerned about facial recognition technology and how law enforcement might use that to violate our. So we could work together. And when we didn't agree, he was a true liberal. Like, let's have the debate. Get your best hold, make your best argument. Let's see who wins. After it's over, we'll shake hands and we'll get ready for the next issue and have the debate. That is so different from what we see today, where it's so the vitriol and going after people and the canceling and everything else. It is a completely different animal. I long for the people like Kucinich, like Dennis Kucinich, who's a good man and believes in so many of the same things we do when it comes to civil liberties. Different on policy. We're miles apart on other policy issues, but we need more of that, frankly, in the United States Congress.
I think I've asked this question to every congressman or senator that I've had on, and I'd love to know your take too. Do you know when? Do you have a moment, or was there a person that you can point to when the Democrats really went off the deep end with this stuff, when it was, okay, no more talking, no more negotiating, you guys are all bad guys, Nazis, whatever nonsense they're throwing at you? Do you remember when it happened?
Well, I would probably point to November 8th, 2016, when Donald Trump got elected president, because we know what President Trump, an individual, by the way, who I think did an amazing job as president, did more what he said than any president, certainly in my lifetime, accomplished so much with relentless attacks from the left and the Democrats and the media and frankly too many Republicans, and still got so much done. But I think it probably started then. Now there may be something else, but the first thing that popped to mind was the day he wins election, Democrats have been going after him and continue to do so now 5 years later.
Yeah, and then of course there's that moment when Rashida Tlaib, the night she got sworn in, saying she was going to impeach the guy years ago. Yeah, I think you have to have a crime before the guilt, right? If I'm not mistaken, I'm a simple guy.
Yeah, but then we also learned, you think about it, that we learned that the FBI was spying on a presidential campaign. Like, that's not supposed to happen in our great country. A major party's political or presidential candidate, their campaign was being spied on by the other party's Justice Department, i.e. the FBI, Jim Comey. That's scary. And so you talk about, all the misinformation. It's funny, too, because this is the other thing I take away from Jen Psaki's comment. They're the ones identifying misinformation. Well, how many times have they been wrong on that? Over the last 4 years, they told us the protesters were peaceful last summer. They told us that Republicans defunded the police. They told us the dossier was real. They told us Trump colluded with Russia. Bob Mueller did a $30 million investigation, said that's not accurate. They told us Trump cleared Lafayette Square for a photo op. The inspector general said that's not true. They told us, how about this one? Hunter Biden was Russian misinformation. Holy cow, we had an eyewitness, Tony Bobolinsky. We had actual documents, the emails, we had a laptop, and we had the FBI investigating it, but somehow it was Russian misinformation. Time and time again, every major story they told us was misinformation. They lied to us about it. And now they're the ones telling Facebook, oh, you got to take down misinformation. That's frightening.
If I could add a couple to your list, Brett Kavanaugh's a rapist, the Covington kids, Jussie Smollett. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Rape.
So as you are seeing Psaki say, okay, we're flagging things for Facebook, or her other one last week, which was even worse in a way, which was if you're banned from one social media site, you should be banned from all, as if that has anything to do with what her job is. I mean, are you shocked? Like, I think I'm not shocked, right? Like, I've been doing this for a while. I've been sensing and warning about this stuff. But I think a certain amount of people are like, that voted for Biden because they had whatever their aversion was to Trump and the tweets or whatever. But I think a certain amount of people actually are shocked right now, like how out of control this thing feels. Yeah,
I think you're right, Dave. You're not, because you follow it and you know all these issues so well. And frankly, most of us in elective office who've been here, for a few years, we shouldn't be shocked either, because we saw the trend. We saw the IRS target conservatives. We saw what the FBI did with the dossier and with the Trump campaign, and we saw what they did with. So we've seen all this sort of progress. So it's still frightening. It's still scary, but we sort of kind of saw some of this coming. But I do think there are lots of Americans who are very nervous about what they see happening to liberty. I talked with them I was back in our district last week talking with supporters and people. They're very nervous about what they see. And how many times have you gotten the line from someone who follows you, you see them at the airport or something, they come up to you and they'll say, I'm really nervous about our country. Can our country, because they love this country. They love the flag. They love what our country stands for. They love the people who sacrificed for our country and liberated their country and took on the Nazis and everything. They love all that. Appropriately so, but they are nervous, very concerned about where the left wants to take us. And that didn't happen 15 years ago in politics, but now I get that every time I'm traveling through an airport. Right. There used to be a basic agreement that America was fundamentally good, and then it's like, okay, we can argue from a liberal perspective or a conservative. Now it's, in essence, should this thing continue? But backing up to the big tech stuff for a little bit. Yeah. So breaking them up, let's talk about that for a little bit. What does that actually look like? Like, you want Amazon basically to have their server farm, AWS, as a separate company than, say, the consumer-facing side that we all, buy our toilet paper on, or that sort of thing? What I think should happen is, we have historically done this. We got 100 years of antitrust law. We have historically done this through the court process. Now, that is a slow process. I would like to speed that up, because I see the danger of big tech, and I see, what we just talked about with the government pressuring big tech to do certain things that the government defines as misinformation. That's dangerous. So I want that process speeded up. But what I don't want, and what makes me nervous is, because I think it would be a worse situation, is to, instead of having it go through the court system, is to move it over to the regulatory commission. Because right now at the FTC, the people who run the FTC are radical leftists. Becca Slaughter is a member on the FTC commission. She has said we should use antitrust law to deal with systemic racism. Yeah. You and I would say, no, we shouldn't. And 100 years of antitrust law says, no, we shouldn't. So that scares me. Lena Khan, who's the new chairman of the FTC, who, by the way, when Biden nominated and put up for nomination from the Senate, didn't tell the senators, which is historically the way it's supposed to work, but he didn't tell the senators that he was going to make her chairman. Guess where she worked before she went to the FTC as chairman? She worked for Facebook or something, right? Well, she worked there, but more importantly and more recently, she worked for Jerry Nadler, David Cicilline, Hakeem Jeffries, all the people who were the impeachment managers who put together these bills. My guess is Lena Khan wrote the bills that give all the power to the agency she now chairs. I don't think that's a good thing for Dave Rubin, who believes in the First Amendment, and Jim Jordan and the folks I get to represent. So that's my concern. Let's let it work through the court process. But let's do it quicker, because as bad as it's getting, and the pace that big tech is going to limit our freedoms, I want an answer soon. And I think Justice Thomas is with us. My guess is the court's with us, because they got to be Amy Coney Barrett, Justice Alito. They got to be concerned with what they see when the press secretary for the United States president steps up at the White House briefing room and says, we're working with Facebook to take down people's posts and take down information. So you basically see the judicial branch, I mean, in essence, the Supreme Court, because that's where this probably ends up. You see that as the last firewall, right? I mean, at that point, if nothing else works, and to your point, if the whole middle branch of government, if the congressional branch and all the regulatory people, if they're all compromised, it's judicial or nothing. Well, but we could do something legislatively, but frankly, we're not in control. I mean, right now, the Democrats have the House, they have the Senate, and they have the White House, and they're going to have the White House until President Trump runs and wins in 2024, which I hope is what's going to happen.
Oh,
I think it's going to happen.
Bold. So you think he's doing it? You think he's doing it?
I do, and I've encouraged him to. Every time I talk to him, I encourage him to run. But the truth is, we can't change anything right now. So all we can do is what you do. We can highlight every time they're infringing on Americans' liberties. And I do it at every speech I give, all across our district, all across the country. Every time I'm out talking, I talk about, I just go to the First Amendment. I said, think about the First Amendment. The liberties you have under the First Amendment, every single one of them has been assaulted by government over the past several years. I mean, your right to practice your faith, your right to assemble, your right to petition your government, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, every single one. I use the example, when there's still churches today, Dave, that probably, well, my guess is in LA County, there are probably still churches today that a full congregation can't meet on Sunday morning. And a few weeks, this is probably now, 8, 9, 10 weeks ago, I spoke to, think about your right to assemble. I spoke to the New Mexico Republican Party in Amarillo, Texas, because they had to go to Texas to get freedom. They had to go to Texas to be able to assemble in the size they wanted to assemble because their Democrat governor wouldn't let them assemble more than 149 people in the state of in New Mexico. So that's crazy. But and on it goes. So I think this is the fundamental issue, and I mean, scares me to death. Scares me to death.
So to that point, how concerned are you that just nobody trusts the system anymore? That's sort of where I'm getting, which is, that's what the kids call black pill, that you just think that the thing is so broken that nothing could be done. And I always try to put a positive spin on all this stuff, and I want to do solutions, of course. That's why I do this. But I think a lot of people are just like, you know what? I don't trust the medical experts because of lockdowns and masks anymore. I don't trust the politicians who say one thing about elections when their guy's in and the other way. Like that the whole system, it only works if we trust it. And a lot of people just don't trust it anymore.
Yeah, and I'm very concerned about that. And it's when you have, and again, I think most of the blame, frankly, lies with the left. The left has attacked every institution we have. And frankly, let's just be honest. The left controls almost everything, right? The left controls big media. The left controls big tech. The left controls Hollywood. The left controls higher education. The left controls big corporations. The left now controls big sports. I mean, just watch the NBA, right?
I don't watch the NBA anymore.
Right. But the left controls the Congress right now. The left controls the White House. The one area they don't control, and this is the beauty of our great country, the one thing they don't control is they still don't control individuals. We, the people, still have individual liberties, individual rights, so we can think for ourselves and express ourselves and speak out. But they're even trying to stop that with the whole cancel culture. So, and finally, maybe the one institution that they still don't control is state and local government. And that's why what DeSantis is doing in Florida with the Florida legislature, what they're doing, they're pushing back in our federal system. That's how the founders, and God bless these individuals, put our system together. There are not only checks and balances with the separate and equal branches of government, there's the federal system where the checks and balances also come from the states. And that's where we have to fight back now. And we're having some governors who are doing it. And I think that's giving some more courage to other governors, particularly other Republican governors, to step up and act like DeSantis is doing in Florida and push back on the crazy left and the policies they want.
You mentioned they control the media, too. How much of your day-to-day is just pushing back on just the crazy stuff that the media says about not only you, but just Republicans in general? Obviously a bunch of racist, homophobes, and all that nonsense. Yeah. And, this will shift us to another topic, but, you're passing bills. You guys were always passing bills to restrict voting. And then you look at the actual bill, not that the media ever does it, and you're like, oh, well, it causes, voter ID, that seems okay. And, paper trail, that seems okay. Making sure we count correctly, that seems okay. But how much of your day is just dealing with that sort of nonsense?
A fair amount. I mean, but I tell my colleagues, I tell guys in the Freedom Caucus and colleagues on the Judiciary Committee, I tell them, look, if the press isn't saying something bad about the mainstream press, if the press isn't saying something bad about you, you're not doing anything any good. So just because some people come here and they think like, oh, they're not used to just the relentless attack you're going to get if you're making a difference. So it's a shock for some people. But my attitude is you have to embrace it because that's just the way it is. And it's not fun. It's not pleasant. And you just push back by telling the truth. I always tell people, I think we make this job as of being a member of Congress, we make it way too complicated. What did you tell the voters you were going to do when you ran? They elected you to do that. Go do it. Make the argument, make the case, do it in as compelling and articulate way as you can, but go do that. And if you do that and the press calls you all kinds of names and like you said, you're racist and we're terrible and you're evil and all, okay, fine. It's not fun, but we got to live with it. Just keep pressing on because you're doing what you told the voters you were going to do. And what I find is when you go back home, voters appreciate it. Even if they disagree with you every once in a while, they'll say, I just like the fact that you're fighting and you're doing what you said. I don't agree with all of it. I agree with most of it, but keep fighting. And that's what we're supposed to do, I think, as a member of Congress.
So what do you make of the Republicans that I sort of at this point, I'm kind of new to this side, right? So I maybe have fresh eyes on this. But, when I see a guy like Mitt Romney or someone like Liz Cheney, I call them pet Republicans because they go on MSNBC, they get pat on the head like they're doing anything. And then in essence, they're Democrats. Now, that's fine if that's what they believe at this point. But when you guys get behind closed doors, like, do you say to them, hey, is there any conservative principle? Is there any piece of the Republican Party that you guys are here to defend? Or is it just so that they're nice to you on cable news?
Yeah, I never get that. I never get why some people want to go be the Republican who attacks all the other Republicans. I mean, once in a while, you're going to have some squabbles. I get that. That's just normal course of business. But there's some Republicans who want to go on TV and just attack Republicans. And of course, CNN will love you for a day, love you for a minute, love you for a second. But as soon as you're not doing that, then they're going to turn around and start attacking you. And I never get like, don't you see that? Don't. Haven't you figured it? It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. But yet you have some people who think their job is to be the darling of CNN and attack Republicans. I just never understood it.
Yeah. So all right. So one other thing on big tech, and then we'll move on to some of the other stuff. Are you worried at all? This is sort of an extension of the black pill question, but just that this stuff has become so big that no matter what you do at this point, that do you think it's possible the ship has just sailed and the government cannot do anything?
Look, I'm concerned. I'm nervous. I mean, don't misunderstand. I think just obviously with the question you asked, you share that same concern. But I mean, I always come back to like, this is America. We're Americans. We get things done. We've solved problems. We've tackled all kinds of obstacles. I mean, there's some people who make the case that it's just this tough, rugged attitude is in our DNA. You think about the people who started this place. Over in Europe, they said, you got to practice your faith a certain way. And they said, no, we don't. We'll get on a ship. We'll risk it all. We'll go to this place called America, and we're going to do it the way we think we need to do it and the way the good Lord wants us to do it. And they did it, and we've overcome everything and become the greatest country ever. So I still feel like there's a ton of people who think like you and I do, who think like the folks I get to represent back in the 4th District of Ohio, who are willing to say, no, we're not going to let it happen. We're going to fight. We're going to do what it takes in the right way to prevail in the end for freedom, for liberty, for free speech. So I guess I'm optimistic, and maybe it's just because I'm, like you, I'm American, and I love the way we conquer things and get things done.
Well, I always tell people I'm a world-weary optimist because I'm an optimist. I don't think I could do this if I wasn't. How could you say what you think for a living if you were an optimist? But I'm also a realist, so that gives you a little world-weary. But to that point, though, if there are enough of us, or let's say there's more of us than them, what do we do about some of this election stuff? Because it seems to me, I played a clip on the show last week, which was a compilation of Democrats in 2018, including Kamala and Klobuchar. You probably saw it.
Oh, yeah.
It's about 15 Democrats talking about rigged elections, talking about voting machines that don't work, talking about hacking, all of the stuff that I'm pretty sure you and I could get blown up here on YouTube right this very moment for talking about if we talk about it now.
Right. Because, Dave, you forgot, only Democrats are allowed to object to election results. We can't object.
I have to make a note about that.
We're not allowed to. I mean, you think about the folks on this January 6th commission on the Democrat side. Benny Thompson objected to the election results in 2001 when President Bush won. Jamie Raskin, the lead impeachment man in impeachment round 2, he objected to Florida on January 6, 2017. Jim McGovern, on the day we had the second impeachment debate on the floor on January 13th, he brought up the week before January 6th, and he said Republicans objected to the will of the people last week when they tried to overturn the will of the people and they objected. So I got up to speak right after that, and I said, well, I said the fine gentleman, the chairman of the Rules Committee from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, said that we tried to overturn the will of the people. I said, but guess who was the first person to object on January 6, 2017? Guess who was the first person?
I got an idea here.
It was the right fine gentleman from Massachusetts who objected to Alabama. Think about that, Dave. Alabama, President Trump won by like 28 points. So he can object to Alabama, but Jim Jordan and Republicans can't object to Pennsylvania, where they unconstitutionally changed their election law. I mean, think about this one fact. The election law and passed by the legislature, as the Constitution requires, in Pennsylvania said election ends at 8 o'clock Tuesday. Of course, election day is always on Tuesday, and first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. It ends at 8 o'clock Tuesday. Democrats sued in the partisan state Supreme Court, and the partisan state Supreme Court, controlled by Democrats, says, no, we don't care what the legislature said. We don't care what the law says. Election day now ends at 5 o'clock Friday. They just extended the election for 3 days. So I'm not allowed to object to that, but Jim McGovern can object to Alabama when Donald Trump wins Alabama by 28 points? You got to be kidding me. So that's the part that it drives. My guess is you spend a lot of your time doing the same thing I do, pointing out the freaking double standard with these people. But you have to do it, because if not, they'll get away with it more.
Let's not forget, I think his name is Josh Shapiro, the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania, who announced 2 days before the election that Biden was going to win Pennsylvania before the election. Yeah,
the guy counting the votes announces 2 days before who's going to win. Maybe there's a problem with them. Call me crazy. Maybe. But of course, Democrats like, oh, you guys are crazy. Somehow we're the conspiracy theorists for just like raising a question about that.
So what do you guys do on messaging then? Because I'm not kidding. I went through the 9 bullet points in the last Texas bill, on the election, that the HB3 that they were going crazy over. And it was things like ID, it was paper trail, it was having cameras when you're counting, and a couple very, very basic things. There was nothing about race in there. There was nothing to stop anyone from voting. There were actually things like actually extending benefits so employers could give more time for people to vote. And yet it's called racist. It's repeated in Associated Press and on NBC and everything else. Like, how do you beat that narrative?
I think, well, again, you point out the facts, you do like you did, but I also think
I'm past that point. What else do you do besides that?
I think Americans get it. So take this, the Texas Democrats. So first of all, America sees Texas Democrats getting on a private plane, taking their football and going home, not doing their job, coming to, this is emblematic of what the Democrats think. I'm going to not do my job, and I'm going to go to Washington where I can say I'm a victim. I mean, that is like so Democrat, right? So they come to Washington, they spread COVID around to everybody else. They fly on a plane with no mask. They probably had to show ID. So I think sometimes just the common sense of Americans, like, these people are crazy. And I am convinced 6 months into this administration, the worst 6 months start to any administration in my lifetime, I'm convinced so many Americans are like, well, maybe I didn't bargain for this. Maybe I should have voted for President Trump. Some of these people who, for whatever, reason, decided not to vote for President Trump, who was such a great president, and they vote for Biden. I think they're like buyer's remorse big time. They're like filling up their gas tank. Whoa, this is costing a lot more. Price of eggs, bread, milk, lumber, price of TVs, price of an airline ticket, price of a hotel. Everything's up. And crime in the streets. And by the way, March was the highest month on record of illegal crossings at our southern border until April, and April was the highest month until May, and May was the highest month until June. That's what you call a trend in a very bad direction. So I think all that they're like saying this is. So I think that's how it gets through, is like Americans have common sense and they're figuring it out.
Congressman, just to be clear, they're not kids in cages anymore. Yeah. They're young people in fun centers.
Yeah, exactly. I've been down.
Since I can tell you're not holding back today, you just mentioned Biden. I mean, what do you think is really going on with Biden? He is not all there. That's my professional diagnosis.
Well, look, it's in some ways it's a big concern, because as much as we talk about all the issues we've talked about, in the end, our adversaries see the same thing that we see. And, you saw, this is probably 3 months ago, when our Secretary of State, Secretary Blinken, was in Alaska, in Anchorage, meeting with his Chinese counterpart. And, we had our team on one side of the table and they had the Chinese on the other side. And the treatment that the Chinese gave to the Secretary of State of the United States of America, I'm like, it was embarrassing. And frankly, you didn't see Secretary Blinken really push back. It's like, if that happened, well, first of all, that would not happen in the Trump administration to Mike Pompeo. But if it did, if they were crazy enough to say those kind of things to Pompeo, I know Mike. He'd have got up, like maybe he'd flipped the table over, or he would have got up, or he would have said, with all due respect, that is entirely wrong. You don't talk to. There would have been pushback, real pushback, like you're supposed to do in real diplomacy when you come from a position of strength, and it didn't happen. And I'm like, now we see China, what they said to Japan just a couple of days ago, and now we see what Putin is saying about any type of things we're going to put in Europe. I'm like, that's what happens when you don't project strength, and when you have a commander in chief, you have a president of the United States who is behaving in the way President Biden is, and it's dangerous for not only the United States and our security, but frankly for our allies and how things work in the world, and that's troubling, I think. And obviously you see it, and I think so many Americans do.
Do you hear that from counterparts in other countries? Because my belief, although the media won't show it this way, my belief is that certainly Western European countries, but I think most of Europe, I think most of South America, I actually think most of the world, they want us to be strong. They want us to lead.
Of course. Of course they do. Now, they might go out because of the liberal press, and after a world leader meets with President Trump, my guess is behind the scenes they're saying, "Hey, keep it up, they appreciate it." Then they'll go out and they'll do the liberal stuff, and they'll say bad things about President Trump. But they appreciate it when America. I always say this: the world's a safer and better place when we lead, and you can't lead militarily and diplomatically unless you lead economically. And right now, the Democrats are doing everything wrong. Think about economics. Democrats lock down states. Democrats spend like crazy. Democrats pay Americans not to work, and then for those who are working, they're getting ready to raise your taxes. Now, that's four of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard, but that's what they're doing economically. So that is going to hurt our chance to lead both diplomatically and militarily, because the way this world operates is you better be the economic superpower if you're going to be the military. So they work together. And that's the part that scares me. So, yeah.
But do you think it's too much of a jump to say that in essence the Democrats right now are basically just doing China's bidding? I mean, if you keep locking us down, keep wrecking our economy, keep making sure that we don't go to meetings and put a strong posture out there, that we make it clear that China can basically do whatever they want, that the Chinese got to be pretty happy. Plus there was some stuff on Hunter Biden's laptop, which I'm not sure if we're allowed to talk about that anymore, that they might have on Biden. I mean, it's just a whole mess.
No, it is. I don't want to think it's that we got people in our government doing things in that way. I just think that
I had Kevin McCarthy in studio a couple weeks ago, and he said for sure that Eric Swalwell has been compromised by a Chinese spy, and he said Nancy Pelosi knows it. Okay, he's the minority leader of the House. Like, is he lying to me?
No, but he gets briefings that I don't get. I mean, I was on the Intel committee for a few months back during the first impeachment, so I don't get the briefings that Leader McCarthy gets. So I mean, if that's what Kevin said, I believe him 100%. It's just, I just think that we got so many members now, in members of Congress, members in the people in the government who are willing to do what the radical left says. It's just like they've taken over the Democrat Party. And you said it earlier, Dave, and I think this is so true. We now have the bulk of one of the major political parties in our country who thinks the country's bad. I mean, like that. My background's in the sport of wrestling. I've been to Cuba twice. I've been to what was then the Soviet Union. And I tell people, you go to places like that, you thank the good Lord you live here. I was joking. I said I was in Moscow in February. It's like 400 below zero, man. You thank the good Lord. And the food was terrible. And Cuba was a warm Soviet. Yeah, and Cuba was a warm Soviet Union. And I always tell folks, it's not about the people. The Cuban people were great. The great athletes. The Russian people. But when you have a system that doesn't value freedom and rule of law and private property rights, and bad things happen. So now we have a major political party in the country where you have a bunch of leftists who think our country, where we have all those things, private property rights, rule of law, freedom, liberty, they think all that's bad, and they want to put all their authoritarian baloney on the rest of us. That's the problem. And that's why we have to fight back in the most compelling and articulate way that we can.
So speaking of authoritarian baloney, you said to me right before we started this thing, because you know I'm out here in Cali, you said, how long are you going to stay out there? I mean, just in the last week or so, we suddenly have an indoor mask mandate again. It's done by one middle management bureaucrat. I have no idea where the mayor is. As you know, we're in the midst of the recall of the governor. Thank the good Lord. But do you think that do you think this stuff is going to stop at any point? Or does the government now just have the idea of COVID so that at any point, any authoritarian in any of these blue states can just be like, yeah, we're locking you down again. Yeah, we're putting masks on you again. And God knows what comes down the pipe.
Yeah, I think Democrats may try some of that. They may even try it. I mean, the Speaker may try it here. They may put the mask mandate back on members of Congress, even though probably, just about every single member of Congress has probably already been vaccinated. But I tend to I go back to the optimistic point that we were talking about earlier. I think Americans have had it. I know the folks I represent in the 4th District of Ohio, West Central, North Central Ohio, they're like, ain't no way. Ain't no way. I'm going back to all that baloney. They're going to do that to our business, our small business, our company. And there's no way Mike DeWine's going to make me wear a mask and do all that. It's just not going to, I just don't see it happening. And I think you're going to see state after state. And a lot of these governors saw that when Governor DeSantis and some other governors stood up, took a principled position, and then it played out and looked like, their economy was stronger. They didn't have any worse COVID. In many cases, they had better COVID numbers. I think a lot of these governors are like, you know what? DeSantis did it right. We're going to do more of that. So I think the people of this country are going to say, time out. We're not going there again. I don't care what Dr. Fauci says. I don't care what they say. We're smart people. We're Americans. We believe in liberty. We understand COVID is serious. We understand it's real. But we'll deal with it in the right way. We're not going to shut down our business. We're not going to wear masks. We're not going to shut down our schools.
Can you just talk a little bit about what it was like sort of more towards the beginning of COVID when everything's breaking, nobody knows exactly what's going on, 2 weeks to flatten the curve. I'm sure you're there with the governor. You're there with some of the mayors. You're with other Congress people. You're trying to figure out what to do. Like, I guess it's different in every state, but is it the governor that's usually deciding this stuff, or are they just handing it over to these middle management people? I mean, we had, there's this famous woman here in LA, Sheila Kuhl, who voted. Yeah. She was the deciding vote, 3-2 to close outdoor dining. And then what'd she do right after she voted? Right. I know. She goes out to eat in Santa Monica. Yeah. And it's those are the people we've really had it with, because no one knew this woman beforehand. Yeah.
No, I know that double standard. Pelosi going to the salon when we couldn't. Gavin Newsom going to a 5-star restaurant when he told us we couldn't have Thanksgiving with our family. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that, drives Americans crazy. But yeah, when it first started, there was, I think, some concern. But in our state, I was the governor working along with the health director, Dr. Acton, and they seem to be running everything. And God bless our General Assembly. In the end, it took a while, but they finally pushed back and they passed legislation that said if the governor is going to put in some emergency order, it's for a specified period of time. And then the General Assembly has to sign off on it if it's going to go any further. And the governor vetoed it, and they overrode the governor's veto. So that's what we need more of in some of these states where governors were doing things and not following the Constitution.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, Newsom gave himself unlimited emergency powers. I mean, he's Palpatine from Star Wars. I don't know if I can make a Star Wars reference with you. I think I can, but that in essence is what he is. All right, let's talk about a couple other things. So there's this January 6th commission. Most of my audience, I think, is probably where you are with this, which is that we've watched 2 years of riots in the streets everywhere, burning down our cities and attacking federal courthouses and all of that. And we had Democrats literally bailing people out and doing nothing and lawlessness everywhere. But they've got their thing. They've got their insurrection, and they want hearings, and they want to spy on more people now because of it and censor more of us and everything else. What's your take on just the whole thing?
You're right. This is impeachment round 3. They're obsessed with going after President Trump. They're going to do it again. There's a fundamental question that needs to be answered, but my guess is Democrats on the committee won't address it, and that is, why was there not a proper security presence and posture that day? Because that's the speaker's responsibility. My guess is they don't want to go there. There was all kinds of information. They knew there was going to be a big rally. It wasn't any secret President Trump was having a rally. Why not have the proper security presence here for an important day like January 6th, where you count and certify the electoral votes from each state? So I don't know that they'll go there. I think this is driven by the fact that we talked earlier. What else they got to talk about? They're going to talk about crime going up in every major urban area. They're going to talk about the price of everything going up on every single good and service you can think of. They're going to talk about the border situation. So they're going to talk about they're getting ready to raise taxes. They're going to talk about, they're going to talk about the fact they're going to keep spending, driving up prices even higher. I mean, what else do they got to talk about? So they're going to do this and they're going to attack the president because that's all they got. I mean, what is it? CNN's ratings now are down so far because and yet they're still talking about Trump, but they can't do it in the same way they did before. So they've been obsessed with going after President Trump. And here they go again, because that's the only thing they got in their playbook.
Congressman, you forget that Joe Biden tweeted out that the average American saved 16 cents on their July 4th cookout. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. 16 cents. Wait, you've mentioned the second impeachment a couple of times. Just real quick on that. Did anyone think that it was legit? I mean, even I know how you felt about it, but did any of the Democrats at that point, there was no support for it in the country except in the most radical left quarters. Did anyone think it was legit?
Well, the hard lefties in the Congress, sure, just like the hard lefties around the country. But you're right. The rest of the country was like, what are you doing? He's not. He's leaving office in a few days, and the trial actually took place after he was out of office. So, but that's when it's an obsession. I mean, it's truly an obsession with these folks. And I remember when I first heard the term Trump derangement syndrome, I'm like, well, whatever. But I'm sure you've been around people who are like, no, it's a thing. People just get like consumed with being against President Trump, and it's sometimes it's tough in families. We got relatives who are like, most of them are not. Most of them love President Trump. They're like me. They love what he did for the country. But others are like, whoa, and you're just like, oh, I never saw that coming. But some people, it just hits them and they can't shake it loose.
Yeah. So on the Trump front, I mean, you obviously were and are one of his big allies. Was there anything that you tried to get him to soften on or change on or message differently that he didn't, that you think might have hurt him? No.
I mean, well, when President Trump first came into office, Paul Ryan put forward the Obamacare repeal legislation. Terrible approach, and I thought the wrong bill. We should have just done what we had passed back in the end of 2016, what we campaigned on. We should have just passed that. That's what Mitch McConnell wanted to do because he had the votes in the Senate to pass that. We passed in the House. Should have brought up the same bill. Paul Ryan decides, no, we're going to do this 3-bucket approach. We're going to do part of it here. Then we're going to do some of it through regulatory reform. I'm like, what are you talking about? So I opposed the Ryan healthcare repeal because it was bad. It wasn't what we told the voters we were going to do. And President Trump was new to office. He actually supported what Paul was doing. And then once that went through, then Mark Meadows went to work and we got another bill that passed the House that was much more consistent with what we told the voters we were going to do. And unfortunately, we all remember when John McCain gave the thumbs down and it didn't pass. But I think that's through that process where we were actually opposed to what the speaker was doing and what the White House was supporting. I think President Trump learned like, oh, you can count on these guys. They're going to stick with stuff. And then Mark and I we just got to know the president, and we so appreciated his doing what he said he would do. I mean, that's what the Freedom Caucus is, our mission statement. We talk about doing what we told the voters we were going to do. That's what President Trump did. And we went to bat for him because he did it. I mean, you just think about this. Every single presidential candidate, both Republican and Democrat, over the last several cycles, for most of my lifetime, have said, if you elect me, I will put the embassy in Jerusalem. They've all said it. They get elected, and then they come up with a bazillion reasons why they can't do what they said they were going to do, and frankly, what they were elected to do. President Trump gets elected, and he goes, I'm going to do it. All the State Department people said, well, Mr. President, you better not do that. The other concerns are. He goes, I told the people I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. He did it, and it worked out fine. So that is what I so appreciated about this guy, and we need a lot more, frankly, like him, willing to do what they said in elective office.
Yeah. So you've mentioned DeSantis a couple of times. I mean, obviously you like him. One of the things that I've been saying is, look, if DeSantis runs, to me, we need some young blood. I think he's only 42 or 43. Yeah. I mean, it would be a generational shift. And that maybe Trump acts as the bodyguard. He still takes all the hits. He deals with all the media nonsense. But then it allows for just a change because we need a change, if nothing else, than just for age and just that we need to move forward. Or that sort of sounds. It almost sounds pie in the sky, but we just need some new blood. But it sounds like you want Trump either way, even though you like DeSantis.
Oh yeah, I want President Trump. I think first of all, I think again, as I've said it a few times, no one has proven that they can take as much heat and as much intensity as President Trump took and still get so much done, still do so much of what he said. So I definitely am for President Trump. I want him to run. That's who I'm for. If he chooses not to, you're right. Ron DeSantis would be great. Ron DeSantis, there was 9 of us who started the Freedom Caucus. Ron was one of the 9. Ron has been rock solid. I mean, what he's done in Florida, sticking to his guns. And plus, I always tell folks, it never hurts to be smart. Ron DeSantis is a smart guy. He's a smart guy. It never hurts to have smart people. And if you got smart people who are principled, who are in positions of leadership, even better. So I think that's who President Trump is. I think that's who Ron DeSantis is. But I want President Trump to run. I am 100% for him. I think he's our best candidate. But if he doesn't, Ron DeSantis would be great.
Yeah. What else has been on your mind? I'm going to give you a general one here. Like, just what else is sort of running through your mind as you're doing your job these days and all the craziness?
Fauci knew on January 31st, 2020, at 10:32 p.m., he gets an email from Dr. Christian Anderson, one of his virologists who had received our tax dollar, your tax money, my constituents' tax money, received our tax dollars, doing research. He sends an email to Dr. Fauci, 10:32, January 31st, 2020, and he says the virus looks engineered. It's not consistent with evolutionary theory. So Anthony Fauci's on notice clear back in the first month of 2020 that this virus came from a lab, most likely. Looks engineered, not consistent with evolutionary theory, didn't jump from an animal to a human. He's on notice. And what does he do over the next year? Downplays that, tells us something different. And so to me, that is like, you're the highest paid official in our government. You're on every talk show. You're covered every day. You're Time Magazine person of the greatest person on the planet for the last 1,000 years, whatever they gave him. And you're misleading the American people. And there's things that happen after that, emails that happen that reinforce that. I think he knew early on, by February 1st, the next day, I think he knew there's a lethal virus on the loose. There's been gain-of-function research funded at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. That gain-of-function research didn't go through the P3 framework, the oversight framework. And I got an email from one of the virologists who's an expert in this area who says the virus looks engineered, not consistent with evolutionary theory. He knew all that on February 1st.
Do you think he's actually in trouble for lying to Congress? I mean, that's what Rand Paul was really trying to get him on in the last couple of days. In effect saying, hey, you said that the NIH funding did not have anything to do with this virus being engineered in the Wuhan lab. And now it kind of looks like it is. His answer was very confusing because he basically was sort of saying, well, we funded some stuff, not necessarily that study. And he gave a lot of bureaucratic doublespeak.
And a sub-grant through EcoHealth, blah, blah, blah. It's like it was American tax dollars going through EcoHealth, going to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So look at the email he sent. He gets that 10:32 email from Dr. Christian Anderson saying, looks engineered, not consistent with evolutionary theory. 2 hours later, 12:38 in the morning, he sends an email to his top assistant, Dr. Auchincloss, who's worked for him for like 16 years. He sends him an email that says, Hugh, keep your phone on. Important task you will have to do. Read this paper that I've attached. It was like, the house on fire kind of email. And that the paper he attached was an article written by Dr. Shi, the so-called Batwoman in Wuhan, China, where they're talking about gain-of-function research. So Dr. Auchincloss, 11 hours later, gets back to Dr. Fauci, 11:47 a.m. the next morning, February 1st, gets back and says, gain-of-function research was happened. It didn't go through the P3 framework. I will look to see if we have any ties to it. In other words, I'll look to see if what we need to do to cover our backside. That to me tells a lot. And now again, maybe I'm misinterpreting. I'm just reading the emails. Maybe I'm wrong about the emails. But Dr. Fauci, he doesn't want to come testify in front of us anymore, the Select Committee on the Coronavirus. Democrats won't invite him in. We invited him in. Republicans wouldn't come. He goes to every TV show, testifies. He's testified, I think, like 18 times in front of Congress, but won't come in front of us again. I'd love to question him one more time.
Right. And then, of course, there's that email from, I think it was February or March, where he just has a friend emailing him about, she's going on vacation and does she have to wear masks? And he basically says, well, if you buy the mask at a store, it doesn't work anyway. Yeah.
I mean, the misinformation, think about that. They're going after us for misinformation or for other people for misinformation, but the misinformation we've received from the government and from the mainstream press on so many issues, as you pointed out earlier, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. All right. On that note, and that was a professional cough you did right there. You didn't do it in the hand. It went this way. On that note, if people want to pay attention to the big tech stuff that you're working on, where can we send them? Because I think people are just like, hey, I want to help somehow. Doesn't even mean with dollars. I just want to know what's going on and what bills I should support and that sort of thing. Yeah,
go to the Judiciary Committee website. We will have information up there. We have the principles up there. We're trying to put them in bill form. We want to get there soon. But go to the Judiciary website. I don't know that. I mean, our media people and our staff know what that is, but
there's a lot of dots. All the government websites, they don't look that good, frankly. That would be, you want to do your major job, you get them to redo all of those government websites. Congressman, I appreciate your time.
I've had a good time. Thanks.
Keep up the good fight. We need to fix some of this stuff.
You keep it up, and we need defenders like you out there talking about protecting Americans' liberties and specifically the First Amendment. So God bless you.
I got nothing better to do than save the world.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.